Hands on the wheels where I can see them.
The gun came out fast, the way it always does when a man has already decided what he is going to do before he has any reason to do it. One moment, there was just the rain, the dark, and the long, empty stretch of Highway 22 cutting through the pine flats of Calverton County, Georgia, and the next moment, there was a .45 caliber barrel pointed at a woman's chest through the open window of her own car, the metal slick with rain, the officer's hand not entirely steady, his eyes wide with the particular kind of certainty that belongs only to men who have never once been wrong in their own minds. He thought he was in control of the situation. He thought he was the most dangerous thing on that road. He thought the woman sitting with her hands raised and her face completely calm was afraid of him. He was wrong about all three things, and he had less than 11 minutes left before a helicopter dropped out of the Georgia sky and the most powerful law enforcement apparatus in the United States of America landed on his head like a judgment from God. But that comes later. 4 hours earlier, the night had been unremarkable. Highway 22 runs through Calverton County, the way an old scar runs through skin. You stop noticing it after a while, but it never really heals. The road is 2 lanes most of the way, bordered by longleaf pines that press in close enough to make the sky feel small, and the street lights are spaced far enough apart that the darkness between them is complete and total, and has a weight to it that feels deliberate. It was a Wednesday in late July, the kind of southern night where the humidity hasn't broken by midnight and the air sits on you like a warm, wet cloth. And the only sound on the highway was the hiss of tires on wet asphalt and the occasional crack of thunder somewhere to the north. Inside a charcoal gray Chevy Tahoe moving at exactly 53 miles per hour in a 55 zone. Special Agent Naomi Reeves was thinking about her bed. She was the assistant special agent in charge of the FBI's Southeast Division, though you would not know that to look at her tonight, because tonight she was wearing a dark navy hoodie, dark jeans, and a pair of running shoes that had seen better days, and her hair was pulled back in the loose, practical way of a woman who had been sitting in conference rooms for 2 consecutive days and had stopped caring about appearances somewhere around the 14th hour. She had just finished a 2-day trafficking summit in Atlanta, briefings, debriefs, interagency coordination meetings that lasted 3 hours longer than any of them needed to, and all she wanted in the most bone-deep and uncomplicated way a human being can want something was to get back to her temporary rental in Savannah, take a hot shower, and sleep. The interior of the Tahoe was quiet and dim, the jazz station playing low enough that it was more texture than sound, the coffee in the cup holder gone cold an hour ago. Her federal-issue Glock 19 sat in its holster on her right hip, tucked under the hoodie, where it always was as natural and unremarkable a part of her body as her elbow. On the passenger seat, her leather credentials wallet sat in easy reach. She had been a federal agent for 14 years. She had dismantled a cartel distribution network operating across 3 states. She had walked into rooms where people were actively trying to kill each other and talked them down with nothing but her voice and the absolute authority of a woman who knew exactly who she was. She was also a black woman driving an expensive truck alone on a rural Georgia highway at 11 o'clock at night, and she knew in the way that black women in America develop a knowledge of certain things the way sailors develop a knowledge of weather through long and sometimes painful experience. Exactly what that combination sometimes meant in counties like Calverton. The blue and red lights erupted in her rearview mirror. She checked her speedometer first. 53. She checked her lane position. Centered. She checked the date on her registration sticker from memory. Current. She exhaled through her nose a short, controlled breath that was not quite a sigh, and signaled and pulled smoothly onto the gravel shoulder and turned off the engine and placed both hands on the top of the steering wheel with her fingers spread wide and visible, and waited. 40 minutes before he lit up the Tahoe, Officer Dale Pruitt had been parked under the dead concrete of the Route 9 overpass with his engine running and his radar off, eating a gas station sandwich and thinking about nothing in particular, which was more or less how he spent most of his shifts. He was a large man, Dale Pruitt, the kind of large that comes not from the gym, but from years of physical confidence, from moving through the world, certain that your size is a form of communication, that it says things you don't have to say out loud. He was 41 years old, 12 years on the force, and he wore his uniform like a second skin, though it fit him badly now across the shoulders, pulling at the seams in a way that his wife had pointed out and he had ignored. His buzz cut was growing out unevenly. There was a permanent flush in his face that might have been rosacea or might have been the six-pack he went through most evenings, and his eyes were the flat pale gray of a man who had learned early that the easiest way to avoid self-reflection is to stay very busy judging other people. Pruitt had a philosophy, though he would not have called it that, because men like Pruitt do not think of themselves as philosophical. The way he saw it, Highway 22 was his. Not in any official sense that anyone would write down, but in the way that a territory belongs to whoever enforces it, and Pruitt had been enforcing his version of the law on this stretch of road for long enough that the distinction between the law and his preferences had blurred almost completely. He decided who got a warning and who got a ticket. He decided what counted as probable cause and what didn't. He decided who seemed suspicious, and his definition of suspicious had a shape to it that would have been recognizable to anyone paying attention, though nobody in Calverton County had been paying attention in a long time. His personnel file was a document that told a story in the negative spaces in the use of force complaints that had been filed and then quietly withdrawn after conversations between the union rep and the complainants in the dash cam malfunctions that had occurred with a frequency that strained statistical credibility in the commendations he had received from Sheriff Gerald Boone that seemed to increase in number every time a complaint was filed, as if the commendations were a form of institutional inoculation against accountability. In 12 years, Dale Pruitt had never once faced a disciplinary hearing. In 12 years, Dale Pruitt had learned that he never would. Parked a half-mile further down the highway, engine also running, was Deputy Cody Marsh, 26 years old, and 2 years on the job assigned as Pruitt's shadow unit for the overnight shift. Cody was the kind of young officer who had genuinely wanted to do something good with his life when he signed up, who had believed the things they told him in the academy about service and community, and who had spent the last 18 months slowly, quietly, and without ever saying anything out loud to anyone, becoming deeply uncomfortable with the things he saw when he rode with Pruitt. He was not a brave young man, not yet, but he was paying attention in a way that Pruitt had completely stopped doing. When Naomi's Tahoe came down the highway, Pruitt clocked it from 200 yards, the truck first black, clean, the kind of expensive that didn't fit his idea of who belonged on this road at this hour, and then the driver visible only as a silhouette in the dim cab, and then the decision which arrived fully formed and required no deliberation whatsoever. He pulled out from under the overpass, fell in 200 yards behind the Tahoe, watched it for 60 seconds, saw nothing wrong with its driving, and lit it up anyway. Naomi watched him approach in the side mirror with the focused, detached attention she brought to every situation where the variables were not yet known and the outcome was not yet fixed, which was a clinical way of saying she was watching a man walk toward her car with his hand already resting on his holster before he had any reason to put it there. And she was cataloging every detail of his body language the way a trained observer catalogs evidence, because that is what it was. The spotlight from the patrol unit was aimed directly at her side mirror, which was a standard intimidation technique designed to disorient the driver and create a sense of exposure of being seen without being able to see back. And it was the kind of thing she had corrected junior agents for doing during traffic stop training exercises because it escalated rather than de-escalated. It created fear rather than compliance. And fear and compliance are not the same thing, no matter how many officers conflated them. Pruitt positioned himself at her B-pillar behind her natural sight line, which forced her to turn her head to see him, which was another control tactic, deliberate or habitual she couldn't tell yet. License and registration, no good evening, no ma'am, no introduction of himself or explanation of the stop which was required by the department handbook she had read as part of a use of force review 2 years ago. She turned slightly and took him in the name tag read Pruitt. The face was flushed and set with a kind of anticipatory impatience, the eyes moving over the interior of the Tahoe with a scanning quality that had nothing to do with concern for officer safety and everything to do with looking for something to use. She announced that she was reaching for her purse on the passenger seat to retrieve her ID, asked for his acknowledgement, kept her voice even and professional and completely devoid of the deference he was clearly accustomed to receiving. He asked whose car it was instead of answering her. She told him it was hers, repeated the request to retrieve her ID, and told him that if he ran the plates, he would confirm she was the registered owner. What followed was not a traffic stop. It was a performance for an audience of one, which was Pruitt himself, a man who needed to establish dominance so urgently and so habitually that he could not stop himself even when the situation was already going sideways. He suggested the truck was too expensive for someone like her. He invented a swerving violation. He told her to step out of the vehicle with a tone that left no room for the word no. She told him she had not been drinking, that she had not crossed any line, and that she had a dash cam recording front and rear telemetry that would confirm both of those things. The mention of the camera did something to Pruitt's face that was very small and very fast, a tightening around the eyes, a flicker of something that might have been recalculation. And then his jaw set and his chin came up, and he told her to step out of the vehicle anyway, because men like Pruitt do not experience a camera as a deterrent. They experience it as a challenge, which is a distinction that says everything necessary about the kind of officer Dale Pruitt had always been. He ordered her out. She declined. The stop had become something else entirely. Officer Pruitt, Naomi said, her voice dropping into the register she used when she needed a room to stop moving, and listened to her, the voice that carried the weight of 14 years and a federal badge without needing to announce either one. I am a federal agent. My name is Naomi Reeves. I am the Assistant Special Agent in charge of the FBI's Southeast Division. My badge number is 7731. My supervising officer is ASAC, Marcus Calloway, out of the Atlanta field office. My credentials are in the wallet on my passenger seat, and I am not stepping out of this vehicle until you have looked at them. She said it the way she would say it in a report, complete, precise, in the exact order that would matter later when someone was writing it down and deciding what happened and who was responsible for it. Pruitt looked at her for a moment that stretched slightly too long, and then he laughed. It was not a nervous laugh or an uncertain laugh. It was a genuine one, the kind that comes from a deep and comfortable place. The laugh of a man who has heard excuses for 11 years and has developed a contempt for them so total it has become a kind of entertainment. He looked out at the empty highway as if checking whether anyone was watching him enjoy the joke, then looked back at her. Federal agent. He said the words shaped into something between mockery and pity. Right. And I'm the Secretary of Defense. You people always come up with something, don't you? I know a lawyer. I'm related to the mayor. I'm a cop. Now we're doing FBI. That's a new one, I'll give you that. Officer Pruitt, sweetheart. The word landed like a hand on a shoulder that had not asked for one. I have been doing this for 12 years. Step out of the vehicle. She told him again quietly and without any variation in tone that her weapon was on her right hip, and she was not reaching for it, and that she was formally identifying herself as a law enforcement officer, and that if he touched her, he would be assaulting a federal agent. She said each of those three things as separate sentences clearly spaced, because she wanted them preserved on the recording as distinct and unambiguous statements. Pruitt reached past her and grabbed the door handle with his left hand, yanking it open. Naomi had been in a building in Bogota when someone kicked a door open and two men came through it with weapons raised, and she had not flinched then, and she did not flinch now. She braced her legs against the floor panel and the dead pedal, using the geometry of the vehicle to anchor herself, and she kept her hands exactly where they were visible and open, because her hands were the most important thing in the world right now, and she knew it, even if Pruitt did not. She needed him to commit. She needed the camera to see everything he was choosing to do without being provoked into it, without being given anything he could later call a justification. She needed the record to be clean and complete because the record was the only thing that was going to matter when this was over, and she was already thinking about when this was over. Pruitt let go of the door, stepped back, and his hand went to his holster. Not the slow, exploratory movement of a man considering options, the fast, definitive movement of a man who has made a decision and is implementing it. He drew the weapon and leveled it at her chest. The barrel was 18 inches from her sternum, and the rain was running down the slide, and the safety was off, and his finger was inside the trigger guard, which was a violation of every firearm safety protocol she had ever been taught, and which told her with complete clarity that she was dealing with a man who had moved past reason and into something else entirely. She raised her hands, slowly, palms to the windshield, and she kept talking. Time does not stop in moments like this, but it changes. It becomes granular, textured each second, broken into fragments that the brain files away with a thoroughness that normal time does not allow. Naomi had read the research on this phenomenon in a criminology journal 3 years ago and had thought it was interesting in the abstract, and now she was living it, and it was accurate. She could see the small nick on the front sight of Pruitt's weapon, a scratch that looked old and untreated. She could see the tendons in the back of his hand shifting under the skin as his grip tightened and then adjusted. She could see his chest moving with the short, high-chest breathing of a man in an acute stress response, the kind that narrows vision and degrades fine motor control, which meant that the weapon in his hand was significantly less stable than he believed it to be, which was either better or worse, depending on what happened in the next 30 seconds. "Hands up," he was saying, though his voice had lost the contemptuous ease it had carried a minute ago and acquired a higher, tighter quality. "Get on the ground. Get on the ground right now. I will not ask you again." The commands were contradictory. Hands up and on the ground are not positions you can occupy simultaneously, which told her that the person giving the commands was not thinking clearly, which was the most dangerous kind of person to have a gun pointed at you. "Officer Pruitt," she said, keeping her voice at a measured, unhurried pace, the voice she used when she was the calmest person in a room and needed that fact to be contagious. "I hear you. My hands are up. I am not moving. I am not a threat to you. I need you to hear me say that because what happens in the next 30 seconds is going to define the rest of your life, and I would like it to go well for both of us. Shut up. Shut up. Kick the door open. Get on the ground face down." She did not kick the door open. She explained calmly and in plain language exactly why she was not going to do that, not as defiance, but as information, as a gift of context that he was too flooded with adrenaline to ask for himself. She told him that if she got face down on the gravel, he would find her weapon. She told him that when he found it, the situation would escalate in a way that he could not walk back. She told him she had read 12 case files in which a stopped driver went face down on pavement and was subsequently shot, and in 11 of those 12 cases, the officer's report said the driver reached for a weapon, and she knew how those reports were written because she had investigated 3 of them. She was not begging. She was not threatening. She was giving him every piece of information she had and trusting him to do something useful with it, while being completely prepared for the possibility that he would not. "My badge number is 7731, she said again. "My supervising officer's name is Marcus Calloway. The U.S. Attorney currently overseeing the Southeast Division trafficking prosecution is Kenneth Adler. I can give you his direct line from memory. I can give you the case number of the indictment we returned last month. I can give you any piece of information you need to verify who I am, but I need you to want to verify it. And right now, I need you to let me open my wallet with my left hand while you keep that weapon on me, and I need you to look at what is inside it." Something in the specificity of it reached him not enough to fully penetrate, but enough to create a hairline crack in the certainty he had arrived with. The gun lowered 2 inches, not holstered, not put away, but no longer aimed at the center of her chest. She moved her left hand at the speed of cold honey, visible, deliberate, narrated, hooked her finger around the wallet, drew it across the console, opened the flap. The gold shield sat on top. The overhead light caught it. Pruitt leaned in. He saw the seal. He saw the photo. He looked at her face, and then at the photo, and then at the badge, and then he did the thing that would haunt him for the remaining conscious hours of his life as a free man. He holstered his weapon, crossed his arms, and told her the badge was a prop. He reached for his radio and called it in, combative, suspect, black female, fake FBI credentials, requesting transport to county. Naomi lowered her hand slowly and reached for her phone. She watched him talk into the radio with the expression of a woman who has just watched someone seal their own fate and is giving them the courtesy of a moment to finish before the consequences begin. He was animated now, almost cheerful, narrating the stop to dispatch with the confidence of a man who had no idea what he had just stepped into, and she let him finish, and she let the silence after he clicked off his radio sit between them for exactly 3 seconds. Then she picked up her phone. "Who are you calling?" Pruitt asked. The contempt was still there, but something else had joined it. Not fear, not yet, but the distant awareness that the situation had a texture he hadn't felt before. She told him she was calling the people who were going to come and sort this out. She pressed the speed dial number that connected to the Atlanta Field Office Emergency Operations line, the number that existed for exactly this category of situation, and the line connected on the first ring with the kind of immediate alert professionalism that you only get from people who have trained for middle-of-the-night calls and know that hesitation costs lives. Reeves. "This is Atlanta Dispatch. Your panic beacon went active 11 minutes ago. Report status." The panic beacon. She had triggered it the moment the lights went on in her rearview mirror, a single button press on the device built into the Tahoe's console. A protocol she followed every time she was stopped by law enforcement while in a vehicle registered to the Bureau because she had helped write that protocol and she believed in it. She reported her situation in clean sequential field terminology: agent in distress. Armed hostile local law enforcement officer refusal to acknowledge federal credentials, weapon drawn and leveled. Attempted unlawful detention officer has called for transport. GPS coordinates are live on the beacon feed. Copy that. Agent Reeves, the voice said, filling the cab of the Tahoe through the Bluetooth speakers at a volume that Pruitt could hear clearly from where he was standing, and she had not adjusted the volume because she wanted him to hear every word. Panic beacon confirmed active. ASAC Callaway has been notified and is en route. We have a tactical team completing an I-20 operation. ETA to your coordinates is 9 minutes. Highway Patrol has been notified. Highway 22 is being shut at the Millbrook interchange and the Route 9 junction. Chopper is airborne. Do not engage unless fired upon. Hold position. Help is coming. Pruitt had stopped moving. He was standing at her door with his radio in one hand and an expression on his face that she would remember for a long time, not the aggression which was gone, but what was underneath it, which was a dawning comprehension arriving too late to do anything about itself. His eyes moved from the phone to the car speakers, to the sky in that order, as if he was trying to locate the source of the thing that was happening to him. The sound came before the light, rotors. Distant at first, a rhythmic pressure in the air rather than a sound you could quite identify, and then closer still, until the pines on both shoulders of the highway began to sway, and the rain started moving sideways, and the darkness above the tree line began to fill with a white light that expanded as it descended until it was not darkness anymore, until it was a column of light so bright and total that it turned the wet asphalt to silver and made the whole stretch of Highway 22 look like the surface of the moon. Pruitt looked up. Naomi watched him look up. "Officer Pruitt," she said over the building roar of the rotors that is not eBay. The Bell helicopter came down low enough that the rotor wash was a physical force. It pressed against the hood of the Tahoe, bent the tops of the longleaf pines in both directions, at once turned the rain into a horizontal wall of water that hit Pruitt broadside and tore his uniform cap off his head and sent it spinning into the ditch 30 feet away. He threw up his arm to shield his eyes from the spotlight, which was the kind of light that does not accommodate shielding. It came from directly above, and it was total, the kind of illumination that removes shadows entirely and leaves nowhere to be anything except exactly what you are. What Pruitt was under that light was a man standing alone on a wet highway with mud on his boots and his hand no longer resting on his holster because some part of his nervous system had correctly identified that reaching for a weapon right now would be the last decision he ever made. The ground units arrived 41 seconds after the helicopter established its holding position, and they did not come with sirens, which was somehow worse than if they had. They came with speed and the absolute silence of engines and tires. 4 black Chevrolet Suburbans running without lights until they cleared the tree line, and then suddenly they were everywhere, boxing in Pruitt's patrol cruiser on 3 sides and Naomi's Tahoe on the 4th in a tactical formation called a hard seal. Doors opening before the vehicles had fully stopped. Agents in plate carriers and ballistic helmets, and the kind of focused, purposeful movement that communicates clearly that everyone involved has done this before and would prefer not to do it more than once. The letters FBI were stenciled in yellow across every chest and every back. Pruitt raised his hands without being told which was the first correct instinct he had exhibited since the beginning of the stop. And then he started talking. He was a sheriff's deputy. He was the law. They had the wrong situation. There was a misunderstanding, and 6 different voices told him simultaneously to keep his hands up and get on the ground, and the commands were not contradictory the way his had been, and he did not have the option of declining. His knees went first. He hit the wet gravel hard, and 2 agents were on him before he finished going down, and the handcuffs went on with a sound he would later describe in his federal deposition as the worst sound he had ever heard in his life, which was interesting given how many times he had been the person responsible for making it. Weapons secure, an agent called out, stripping Pruitt's sidearm from its holster with practiced efficiency. Subject is secured. Half a mile back down the highway, Deputy Cody Marsh had pulled his unit onto the shoulder. The moment he saw the helicopter lights, and he had put both hands flat on the dashboard where they were visible through the windshield, and he had not moved them, and he had not reached for his radio. He sat there in the white light of the chopper's orbit and thought about the last 18 months, about all the things he had seen and said nothing about. And he made a decision that he would later be able to look at himself in the mirror about, and he kept his hands exactly where they were. The passenger door of the lead Suburban opened, and Assistant Special Agent in Charge Marcus Calloway stepped out. He was a tall man in his early 50s, wearing a charcoal suit under a Department of Justice windbreaker, and he moved across the wet asphalt with the unhurried, heavy deliberateness of someone who has been woken up in the middle of the night by news that made him angry, but has had the 45-minute drive from Atlanta to convert that anger into something cold and useful. He did not run. Men who have the full weight of the federal government behind them do not need to run toward things. Things come to them. He walked past Pruitt, currently face down and muddy in the gravel, still attempting to explain himself to anyone who would listen without looking at him. Stepping around the prone officer, the way you step around a parking cone, and went directly to the Tahoe, where Naomi had already stepped out and was standing with her hand resting on the roof, her Glock back in its holster, her expression carrying the particular exhausted calm of someone who has just survived something and is still processing the full dimensions of what it was. "You okay, Reeves?" Calloway asked, his voice low, the question direct and genuine and unadorned. "I'm good, Marcus," she said. "No breach." He drew on me at full extension, refused credentials twice, called dispatch to report me as a suspect with a fake badge. It's all on camera, mine and his, though I'll want someone to check whether his is actually recording. Calloway turned slowly and looked at Pruitt, who had now been raised to his knees by 2 agents and was delivering what appeared to be a detailed explanation of his legal rights to people who spent their professional lives enforcing them. Calloway's expression did not change, but something in his posture settled in a way that was more ominous than anger would have been. "He asked for the sheriff," Naomi said. "Did he?" "Sheriff Gerald Boone, Calverton County." Calloway was quiet for a moment, looking out at the tree line where the helicopter was beginning to pull up to a higher holding pattern now that the ground situation was contained. Then he told the nearest tactical team leader to get Pruitt into a transport, and he told Naomi they were going to pay the sheriff a courtesy call. Pruitt, now being walked toward the rear Suburban, processed this information with a delay. It took him a moment to understand that they were not going to process him at the scene and release him into Boone's custody, that they were instead going to walk into the sheriff's house with the man Boone had told him was a civilian impersonating a federal agent. He started talking faster, his voice pitching upward, demanding his union representative, demanding his right to make a phone call, demanding to know on what authority they were doing any of this. Calloway looked at him for the first time since arriving on the scene. Title 18, Section 242. Calloway said pleasantly. Deprivation of rights under color of law. It's a federal statute. Your union rep knows it. The heavy door of the Suburban closed and Pruitt's voice disappeared behind it, and the convoy began to move. The Calverton County Sheriff's Department was a squat, broad-shouldered building from the 1970s, all pale brick and small windows surrounded by a chain-link fence topped with coiled razor wire that had gone rust orange at the edges, and there was an American flag above the front door that had been bleached to the color of old bone by years of Georgia sun. It looked exactly like what it was, a building that had been built to last and had been used for a long time, mostly for the benefit of the people who ran it. The lights inside were blazing. Pruitt's panicked radio call before his arrest had given Boone enough warning to get dressed and get angry, which was exactly the kind of warning that reveals character. Because what Sheriff Gerald Boone chose to do with it was come outside with deputies flanking him and a shotgun in the crook of his arm, which told Naomi everything she needed to know about how Gerald Boone understood the nature of the moment he was living in. He was a wide, physical man in his late 50s, a white Stetson sitting precisely on his head, a cigar clamped in the corner of his mouth, and the bearing of a man who has been the most powerful person in any room he has entered for so long that the habit of it has become structural, has become part of the way he holds himself and moves through space and looks at people who might be about to challenge him. He looked at the 4 black Suburbans, the federal plates, the tactical gear, the helicopter still audible overhead, and he looked annoyed rather than alarmed, which was either very brave or very stupid, and Naomi suspected it was the latter dressed up as the former. "What in the Sam Hill is this?" Boone said, his voice carrying across the parking lot without effort. "You boys are a long way from Quantico. Who is in charge of this circus?" Naomi stepped out of the second vehicle. She had put on her FBI windbreaker, the bold yellow letters visible against the navy, and she walked to the front of the line with Calloway on her left and 2 agents with carbines at the low, ready, on her right. "I am," she said. Boone looked at her. The calculation in his eyes was fast and visible and ugly. He made a sound that was not quite a laugh and said something to his deputies in a low voice, and then he told Naomi she had no jurisdiction in his county and no authority over his deputy, and that if she didn't move her vehicles off his lot in the next 5 minutes, he would arrest the whole group of them for obstruction. His hand drifted toward the trigger guard of the shotgun, a deliberate, unhurried drift, the kind that is meant to be noticed. Calloway laid out the federal jurisdiction in the flat, informational tone of someone reading from a document he has already memorized, and told Boone that the hand near the trigger guard was something he should think very carefully about before he completed the gesture. Boone's eyes narrowed. He looked at Pruitt, dragged out of the Suburban and now standing in the parking lot in handcuffs, pleading with his boss to fix this, and then he looked at the camera on every federal vehicle and the helicopter overhead and the 16 agents positioned around his parking lot, and he made the calculation that a man makes when he has finally run out of leverage and knows it. He lowered the shotgun. He stood down his deputies. He granted Naomi access to Pruitt's locker, his patrol logs, and his personal vehicle, with the smile of a man who was already in the back of his mind figuring out what he needed to destroy before morning. Naomi saw the smile. She noted it. She had no intention of giving him the time. The interrogation room in the Calverton County Sheriff's Department was a rectangle of institutional beige that smelled of stale coffee and the particular species of anxiety that soaks into walls over years of accumulated use. and the two-way mirror on the eastern wall was filmed with a thin layer of grease that nobody had cleaned in what appeared to be a decade, and the overhead fluorescent tube had a flicker at 3-second intervals that Naomi's brain had cataloged and was now counting involuntarily. Dale Pruitt sat on the far side of the steel table, his wrists cuffed to the bar anchored in the floor, his belt and badge and shoelaces removed, which is standard processing protocol and which has the effect, intended or not, of making a man look reduced, as if the uniform and the accessories were structural components of his size. And without them, he is something smaller. He looked, in fact, considerably smaller. Calloway sat across from him with a closed file folder on the table between them, and Naomi leaned against the wall in the corner, arms folded, saying nothing. Pruitt was not without defenses, even now. He ran through them in sequence, each one delivered with a little less conviction than the last he had initiated. A lawful stop on reasonable suspicion, the driver was non-compliant and evasive. He could not verify the credentials he had feared for his safety. His body camera had malfunctioned. The body camera malfunction being the last refuge of an officer who has run out of other explanations, which Naomi noted and which Calloway noted and which both of them filed away without comment. Calloway corrected the record point by point without raising his voice or varying his tone, which was more devastating than anger would have been, because it communicated that he was not emotional about this, that he was simply working through a list. Then the tech agent came in with the laptop. The dual feed played on the screen facing Pruitt, the front camera showing Naomi's Tahoe moving at 53 miles per hour in a perfectly straight line, not a single deviation from the center of the lane for the full 2 minutes before the stop. And the interior camera showing Naomi's hands on the wheel, showing Pruitt's approach, showing the exact sequence of what happened and in what order it happened, and what was said and by whom. The audio was crisp. The lighting was sufficient. There was not a single ambiguous frame. Pruitt watched himself on the screen the way you watch a version of yourself you don't recognize, or rather that you recognize but would prefer not to. He heard his own voice calling her sweetheart. He watched his own hand go to his holster. He watched the gun come out. He watched Naomi's hands completely visible, completely open the entire time. The footage ended. The room was quiet for a moment that had real weight to it. That Calloway said, pointing at the darkened screen, is 20 years minimum. Aggravated assault with a deadly weapon on a federal officer. Deprivation of civil rights under color of law. Kidnapping because the unlawful detention statute applies from the moment you attempted to extract her from the vehicle. Pruitt put his elbows on the table and pressed his palms against his face, and Naomi watched him do it, and she waited because she knew what was coming next, and she wanted him to get there on his own. "I want a deal," he said into his hands. Naomi placed the evidence box on the table without ceremony, the way you place something down that has been carried a long way and is heavier than it looks. She opened the lid. Inside, arranged in a row, were 9 driver's licenses. Each one belonged to a woman. Each one was black or Latina. Each one had an address in a different state: Georgia, Florida, South Carolina, Alabama, which meant these were travelers, women passing through on Highway 22 rather than locals, who might know someone, might complain to someone, might be believed by someone. None of them had an arrest record in Calverton County. None of them had received a ticket from Pruitt. None of them on paper had ever existed in his patrol logs. He had kept their IDs the way some people keep receipts. Naomi picked up the first one. She read the name aloud, not the case number, not the docket, the name, because these were not files, they were women, and the distinction mattered enormously to her. She told Pruitt what she knew about this woman so far stopped on Highway 22 14 months ago. No arrest record generated, no ticket issued, license never returned. She told him they had called this woman on the way over from the overpass, and that the woman had answered, and that she had spoken to a federal agent for the first time in her life and had cried through most of it because for 14 months she had been carrying what Pruitt had done to her, and had believed, as he had intended her to believe, that there was nowhere to take it. Pruitt was very still. Naomi went through each license the same way. 9 names, 9 women, 9 stories that had not been told yet, but were going to be told now in federal court with a prosecutor and a jury and a public record that would exist permanently. She told him what the pattern looked like from the outside. The invented violation, the implied contraband, the deal, offered the ID kept as insurance and as trophy and as the particular kind of souvenir that belongs to men who mistake power over others for achievement. Pruitt's hands were shaking against the cuffs. He gave them Boone. He gave them everything: the private impound lot on County Road 11, the brother-in-law who stripped the seized vehicles, the cash that was split and never entered an evidence log, the drugs that were resold to a network, 1 county east, the county judge who signed warrants, the way some people sign birthday cards quickly and without reading them. He described the whole architecture of it in the rapid, overlapping way of a man who has been holding a structure upright through sheer tension and has finally let go, and it all comes down at once. He begged at the end of it for protective custody. He said he knew what happened to cops in prison. He said it with the terror of a man who had spent 12 years being the thing that other people were terrified of, and now understood for the first time what that terror actually felt like from the inside. Naomi looked at him for a long moment. "You'll get the deal that the U.S. Attorney's Office decides to offer," she said, her voice carrying none of the satisfaction she might have been entitled to feel. "But Dale, you are going to federal prison, and everyone inside is going to know exactly what kind of officer you were. That part I can promise you." She turned and left the room. The forensics report landed on Naomi's phone at 4:17 in the morning while she was standing in the parking lot of the sheriff's department, drinking a coffee that someone had produced from somewhere, and that tasted like it had been made around the same time the building was constructed, and the report said 3 things that changed the shape of the investigation significantly. First, Pruitt's onboard dash cam archive, once accessed through the vehicle's hard drive rather than the corrupted local storage, contained footage that had been manually deleted, not malfunctioned, deleted the metadata showing the precise time and method of each deletion. 16 additional incidents spanning 19 months on Highway 22. The team was already working on identifying and contacting the women in those recordings. Second, the impound lot on County Road 11, the one that Pruitt had described in his statement as Boone's overflow facility, was registered to a company called Calverton Asset Recovery, LLC, which had been incorporated 4 years ago, and whose sole officer was a man named Ray Boone, the sheriff's brother-in-law as promised, and which had invoiced the county for vehicle storage services to the tune of $340,000 over the preceding 3 years, for vehicles that the county's official records showed as having been processed, logged, and returned to their owners. Third, federal prosecutor Elena Voss, who had been reachable by phone at 3 a.m. without audible complaint and who had been working the Southeast corruption docket for 2 years, said 4 words that had the satisfying click of a mechanism engaging RICO predicate is established. Naomi set down the coffee and told Calloway they were done waiting. At dawn, when the sky was the pale gray of a conclusion being reached, the FBI Bearcat armored vehicle came through the front gate of Sheriff Gerald Boone's ranch and took the decorative wrought iron with it. The gate, which had the Boone family name worked into its metalwork, came off its hinges and landed in the gravel drive, and the convoy of 12 Suburbans flowed through the gap and spread across the lawn, and the voice on the loudspeaker was very loud and very clear and very early in the morning. Boone came out the front door with his hands up. He was wearing a bathrobe and the Stetson, which told Naomi he had heard them coming and had chosen the hat deliberately, which was the kind of detail that would have been funny if the context were different. He looked out at the federal force arrayed across his property, at the agents already moving toward the garage and the outbuildings, and he saw the shredder in his study through the window that he had not quite finished using. He looked at Naomi when she stepped forward, and he tried one more time with the last piece of dignity he had available to him. "You think you won? There's always another one like me. Always has been, always will be." She stepped close enough that her voice did not need to carry. "Maybe," she said, "but they'll remember what happened to you. They'll sit in that car on this highway and they'll think about where you are right now, and they'll think twice." "That's not nothing." She signaled the agents. The handcuffs went on. The ledger, the black notebook he had been feeding into the shredder when the gate came off, was recovered from the floor of his study, intact enough to serve as the foundational exhibit in what would eventually become a 60-page federal indictment. They took him out through his own front gate, through the gap where his name used to be. The federal courthouse in Atlanta fills with a particular quality of air on the mornings of significant trials. Not electricity exactly, but something in that family. A heightened attentiveness in the way people move through the lobby and take their seats and arrange their papers, as if everyone present understands that the day has a shape to it and they are all part of the shape. The trial of United States versus Dale Pruitt and United States versus Gerald Boone ran for 3 weeks in late February, and the gallery was at capacity every single day, which the marshals noted in their daily logs with a professional neutrality that concealed whatever they actually thought about it. The front row of the gallery for the full duration of the trial was occupied by 11 women. They were not organized. They had not arrived together or coordinated their clothing or agreed in advance to sit in the front row. It had simply happened on the first morning that the women who had been called as witnesses and who had traveled from Georgia and Florida and South Carolina and Alabama to be present in this room had found each other in the lobby and had walked in together and sat down together, and they had continued to do so every morning after that. They did not speak during the proceedings. They did not react visibly to testimony. They simply sat, and their sitting was itself a kind of statement, not accusatory, not performative. Just present the way a fact is present, the way the truth of something is present, even in a room where people are working very hard to complicate it. Judge Harriet Okafor presided from the bench with the quiet surgical authority of a woman who had spent 22 years on the federal bench and had long since ceased to have patience for theater in any of its forms. She ran her courtroom with precision rulings where immediate sidebars were rare, and the attorneys who appeared before her understood quickly that her tolerance for procedural games was exactly zero. Pruitt's defense attorney was Warren Stiles, a compact, energetic man who had clearly been excellent at his job 10 years ago, and who brought to the case the slightly desperate creativity of someone working with thin material and knowing it. His strategy was established in his opening statement and held to with admirable consistency. Dale Pruitt was a 12-year veteran operating in a high-crime rural corridor under chronic stress who had made a split-second judgment call based on incomplete information and the reasonable fear that comes with the job, and who deserved the same presumption of good faith that every officer in the field deserves when the situation is ambiguous and the stakes are lethal. The problem with the strategy, as Elena Voss made clear in her own opening statement, was that the situation had not been ambiguous, and the evidence was going to demonstrate that with a thoroughness that left no room for reasonable alternatives. She stood at the podium and told the jury in plain and unhurried language that they were going to see dash cam footage of a woman with her hands on the steering wheel having a loaded gun pointed at her chest. They were going to hear audio of the officer responsible for that gun laughing at federal credentials and calling the agent who held them sweetheart. They were going to see 9 driver's licenses recovered from a locker in the Calverton County Sheriff's Department belonging to 9 women who had been stopped on the same highway and who were going to come to this courtroom and tell them in their own words what had happened afterward. And they were going to look at a pattern that extended over 19 months and 16 documented incidents, and they were going to be asked to decide what word they wanted to use for that pattern. She paused and let the silence do what silence does in a room full of people paying close attention. The prosecution, she said, is going to suggest a word. The word is predatory, and we are going to prove it piece by piece until there is no other word that fits. The dual dash cam footage was played on the morning of the 3rd day of testimony on a screen large enough that every person in the courtroom could see it clearly. And the room was completely quiet from the moment the first frame appeared until well after the last one had faded to black. The kind of quiet that happens when a large group of people are watching the same thing and understanding it at the same depth at the same time. The front camera, first 2 minutes and 14 seconds of Naomi's Tahoe moving down Highway 22 at a steady 53 miles per hour. The lane discipline impeccable. Not a single deviation. The double yellow line remaining on the correct side of the vehicle for the entire duration of the recording. The invented swerving violation. The stated justification for the stop did not appear anywhere in the footage because it had not happened, and watching the footage was the experience of watching an absence, the absence of wrongdoing, the absence of any reason for what followed. Then the interior camera. The jury watched Naomi's hands on the wheel. They watched the blue and red lights flood the rearview mirror. They watched her check her speedometer with the calm efficiency of someone running through a mental checklist rather than reacting with the alarm you might expect, and they watched her signal and pull over and cut the engine and place her hands at 10 and 2 with her fingers spread wide, all before anyone had asked her to do any of those things. They watched Pruitt's approach in the side mirror. They watched the hand on the holster. They heard his voice. There is something about hearing a voice in a quiet courtroom that is different from reading words on a page. The words carry the same information, but the voice carries the person. And the person Dale Pruitt was in those recordings was not the stressed public servant that Warren Stiles had described in his opening statement. The person in those recordings was contemptuous and dismissive and certain of his own impunity in the particular way that comes from never having been checked. And when the jury heard him call her sweetheart and suggest the badge was a prop from a pornography shop, the juror in the second row covered her mouth with her hand and did not put it down for a long time. The gun came out at the 47-second mark of the interaction. Naomi's hands were visible and open and exactly where they had been for the preceding 47 seconds. There was no reaching, no sudden movement, no ambiguity about what was happening or who had made it happen. Stiles objected twice during the playback on grounds that Voss had not established a sufficient foundation for the footage's authenticity. Judge Okafor overruled both objections with a single word each time, overruled, delivered without looking up from the bench. When the footage ended, Naomi took the stand. She was in the witness chair exactly what she had been on the side of Highway 22, composed, precise, unhurried, the kind of calm that is not the absence of feeling, but the mastery of it. And she walked the jury through each decision she had made and the reasoning behind it in the straightforward way of someone who has nothing to hide and knows it. She explained why she had not exited the vehicle. She explained the panic beacon protocol. She explained the specific federal statutes she had been referencing when she gave Pruitt her badge number and her supervisor's name. She explained with a patience that carried no condescension why a federal agent with 14 years of experience and a Glock on her hip had chosen in every moment of that encounter de-escalation over force. Stiles cross-examined her for 2 hours. His central argument was that a reasonable officer in Pruitt's position, unable to verify the credentials, would have been justified in treating her as a potential threat, and that her refusal to exit the vehicle had created the conditions for the escalation. Naomi listened to each question with full attention, and then she answered each one with the case files, the 11 women, the 16 deleted recordings, the 19 months of documented stops. And she pointed out gently and precisely that a reasonable officer does not maintain a collection of 9 driver's licenses in his locker, and that the pattern they had documented was not consistent with an officer responding to reasonable concerns about officer safety. Stiles retreated to his table. The 11 women in the front row did not react. They sat and watched and waited for what came next. The decision to put Pruitt on the stand was Stiles's, and it was the decision that finished what the footage had started. The strategy behind it was not entirely without logic. Stiles believed that Pruitt in person could create a connection with the jury that the footage had severed, could humanize himself, could deliver the narrative of a man under impossible pressure in a way that might create reasonable doubt in 1 or 2 jurors who might be sympathetic to the difficulty of the job. It was the kind of strategy that works when your client is a moderately articulate person who understands what they did wrong and is genuinely remorseful and capable of communicating that remorse without slipping. Dale Pruitt was not that person. He came across in this first 20 minutes of direct examination as reasonably controlled. Stiles had prepped him carefully, and he stuck to the script using the words that had been chosen for him. Overwhelmed, uncertain years of experience, telling him something was wrong. Split-second decision, deeply, regret how it appeared. He made eye contact with the jury when Stiles told him to. He paused before answering in the way that suggests reflection rather than calculation. Then Elena Voss stood up. She did not attack him. She did not raise her voice. She started with the locker. "Mr. Pruitt," she said, holding up the first driver's license in a clear evidence bag, "can you tell the jury why you kept this woman's driver's license in your personal locker at the Calverton County Sheriff's Department?" Pruitt said he had kept it as a field note, a reference document part of his investigative process. Voss asked him to explain what investigative process required a driver's license, but not an incident report, a stop, but no ticket, a detention, but no arrest record. She asked him to explain this for the first license, and then for the second, and then for the third, and each time the explanation shifted slightly. Field notes became memory aids, became procedural oversights, became... He couldn't really say, and the jury watched the story change 9 times, and each change was its own piece of evidence. She moved to the deleted footage. She put the metadata on the screen, the timestamps, the manual deletion codes, the technical report from the Bureau's digital forensics unit, and she asked him in the same unhurried tone to explain the difference between a dashcam system malfunction and a manual deletion. Pruitt said he didn't know anything about how the system worked on the technical level. Voss introduced the maintenance log, which showed that Pruitt had requested and received a training session on the exact deletion procedure he claimed not to understand 8 months before the first deletion appeared in the archive. His composure fractured at that point, not dramatically, not with an outburst, but visibly in the way a person's face changes when they realize the room has understood something they were not ready for the room to understand. He raised his voice slightly, then caught himself, then answered the next question with an over-controlled flatness that was worse than the raised voice because it communicated that he was managing himself, which implied that there was something to manage. Boone tried concurrently did not take the stand. His attorney presented character witnesses and questioned the reliability of testimony from a co-defendant seeking a deal. The ledger recovered intact from his study floor made the character witnesses irrelevant. The jury had the ledger. They had the accounting. They had the brother-in-law who had taken a cooperation agreement and whose testimony ran to 3 days and covered the full scope of what Calverton County's impound enterprise had been. The verdicts came on a Thursday morning, 3 weeks after the trial had begun. Guilty, guilty, guilty. The foreperson read each charge and each verdict, and each time the word came out, it landed in the courtroom the way a heavy thing lands with finality without echo. There were 18 counts against Pruitt, and the word guilty preceded all 18 of them, and the row of 11 women in the front row received each one with the same stillness they had brought to the room every morning. Not triumph, not relief, but the quiet acknowledgement of people who have been waiting a long time for a truth they already knew to become official. Naomi, seated in the gallery 3 rows back, kept her eyes on Pruitt's face and watched him hear his life change and felt very little that she could name, but everything that she needed to feel. The sentencing hearing was held on a Tuesday in early April, 6 weeks after the verdict, and the gallery was still full, though the energy in the room had shifted from the taut, forward-leaning attention of the trial to something heavier and more deliberate, the energy of a room that knows what is coming and is present to bear witness to it rather than to find out what happens. Dale Pruitt stood before the bench in an orange jumpsuit, his wrists secured in front of him, without the belt and the badge and the utility gear that had for 12 years been the external architecture of his authority. He looked like what he was, a man waiting to be told the consequences of his choices, and the choice of clothes was not incidental to the experience, which is why the courts use them. Judge Harriet Okafor looked at him for a long moment before she began speaking in the way of a person who wants to make sure that what they are about to say is heard by someone who is fully present to receive it. "Mr. Pruitt," she said, and her voice was not raised because in her courtroom the silence was sufficient and the words did not need amplification. A badge is not a license. It is a promise. It is a promise made to every person in every community that the person wearing it will uphold a standard, not because they are watched, not because the cameras are running, but because the promise itself has value, and the community that grants it has value, and the trust that makes the whole arrangement work has value. You treated that promise as a convenience when it suited you and a nuisance when it didn't. And you did so not once in a moment of poor judgment under genuine stress, but consistently over 19 months across at least 25 documented incidents to at least 11 women whose only error was driving through your county alone. She paused. "I am going to name them," she said, "because they have been named in this courtroom as case numbers and evidence exhibits long enough." She named all 11, first names, last names, home states. She said each one clearly with a pause between them, and the room was completely silent for the duration of it, and Pruitt looked at the floor after the third name and did not look up again. She addressed the deprivation of rights counts, the aggravated assault count, the kidnapping count, the legal framework of what he had done, and she translated each count into plain language, describing what it meant in human terms, what it had cost the women it had happened to, what it had cost the communities along Highway 22, who now had reason to distrust the very institution that was supposed to protect them. 24 years, she said when she arrived at the sentence. Federal Bureau of Prisons, no possibility of parole. Mandatory minimum under the Federal Civil Rights Deprivation Statute elevated for the use of a firearm and the sustained nature of the pattern established at trial. She looked at him for another moment. He had not looked up. "I also want to say something that is not part of the formal record," she said, "which is that I hope you use the time you have been given to think very seriously about the difference between power and authority. Power is what you believed you had on Highway 22. Authority is what Agent Reeves had, and it had nothing to do with a badge and everything to do with the decision to use it correctly." She picked up the gavel. For Gerald Boone, she was briefer because the facts were simpler and the scale was larger, and there was less she needed to say. She sentenced him to life imprisonment, and she used the word cowardice twice, once in reference to the impound scheme, once in reference to the deputy. He had created the department culture he had allowed to calcify around his own corruption, the county he had treated as a personal asset for 18 years. She said that in her experience, the men who build these structures are more culpable than the men who operate within them because the builder makes a choice and then multiplies it. The gavel came down. The marshals moved to cuff Pruitt for transport, and as they turned him, he looked out into the gallery reflexively, the way a person looks for a familiar face in a crowd when they are frightened, and he found Naomi Reeves. She was standing in the third row, her hands clasped behind her back, weight evenly distributed, the posture of a soldier at rest. She did not smirk. She did not offer him anything that he could hold on to. She looked at him with the steady, complete attention of someone who has finished something important, and she gave him one slow nod, acknowledgement not of him, but of the work, and then she looked away, because she was done with him, and there was nothing left in that direction worth seeing. The weeks after the sentencing moved the way weeks do, after significant things busier than they should be, full of the administrative aftermath that justice produces alongside its more visible results. The paperwork and the press briefings and the interagency coordination calls that begin with someone saying, "going forward," and end an hour later with a list of action items that will take 6 months to complete. The Calverton County Sheriff's Department was formally dissolved by order of the state governor 40 days after the verdict, its territory absorbed into the neighboring Hargrove County, under an agreement that included mandatory body camera compliance for all patrol officers, an independent civilian review board with actual authority rather than advisory capacity, and a federal oversight provision that would remain in place for 5 years. The flag above the old building was taken down on a Wednesday morning by 2 county workers who did not say anything to the one reporter who showed up to document it, and the building was eventually converted into a community health clinic, which is the kind of thing that happens in places trying to replace one kind of institution with another. 4 of Pruitt's colleagues in the department were charged in connection with the impound scheme at various levels of involvement. 2 took plea agreements and cooperated with the federal investigation in exchange for reduced sentences, and 2 went to trial and were convicted. And all 4 of them will serve federal time, which is the part of the story that does not get its own chapter but matters enormously to the families along Highway 22 who had been dealing with all of them for years. The county judge who had signed the illegal warrants, a man named Franklin Aldridge, who had been on the bench for 11 years and who had understood in broad strokes what he was signing and for whom resigned before charges could be filed and provided full cooperation to the federal investigation and was not ultimately charged in exchange for testimony that helped establish the scope of Boone's network. This decision troubled Naomi, as decisions made at the prosecutorial level about who to charge and who to spare in exchange for useful information always troubled her. It is a necessary compromise and an uncomfortable one, and she had long ago made peace with holding both of those truths at the same time without resolving them. Deputy Cody Marsh came forward voluntarily 11 days after the verdict and sat in a federal interview room for 4 hours and described in careful and complete detail everything he had witnessed over 19 months of riding as Pruitt's shadow unit and had said nothing about. He corroborated the pattern. He described specific incidents. He named dates and locations and described what he had seen Pruitt do and then seen Pruitt write in his patrol log, and the 2 accounts did not match. He was not charged. He was referred instead to a federal law enforcement ethics program in Quantico, where he would spend 4 months before being reassigned to a department in a different state. And Naomi, when she heard about the referral, thought it was the right call and thought also that Cody Marsh had perhaps 20 useful years of law enforcement ahead of him if he remembered what it had felt like to sit in that interview room and say the things he should have said sooner. She hoped he would remember. Dale Pruitt arrived at USP Hazleton in West Virginia on a Thursday in late May, processed and assigned a number in the standard way: the name goes away, the clothes go away, and what is left is a series of digits and a case file, and his charges were visible in the system, the way charges always are, because the people who work in federal facilities have access to that information, and because information in closed environments travels the way it travels, which is quickly and completely. He filed for protective custody on his first day. The paperwork was not expedited. He was assigned to general population, and the experience of being the former law enforcement officer whose charges included the sustained predatory targeting of women was in that environment exactly what any person with knowledge of how federal penitentiaries function would predict it to be. Gerald Boone went to a different facility, FCY Cumberland in Maryland, where he would live out whatever years remained to him in the company of a cot and a ceiling and the particular quality of time that prison produces, which is abundant and empty and does not allow a person to stop thinking about the choices that put them there. The ledger, the black notebook recovered from his study floor, became Exhibit A in a federal training curriculum on rural corruption patterns that is now used in law enforcement oversight programs in 11 states. His name appears on the first page of the curriculum under the heading Case Study, which is the only public record of Gerald Boone that will be easily findable in 20 years, and it is the legacy he built for himself, and it fits him perfectly. 3 months after the sentencing, on a Friday evening in early July, when the heat had finally begun to lose its grip and the sky over Calverton County was going gold and pink in the west, Naomi drove Highway 22 with the windows down. She was in her own car this time, not the government Tahoe, a 10-year-old Honda that she had owned since before she was promoted and that she had no intention of replacing because it was reliable and unassuming and had never given her a reason to distrust it, which were qualities she valued highly in vehicles and in people. The jazz station was on low. She had a coffee that was still warm because she had stopped for it 40 minutes ago and not because she was in any hurry. The badge was on her hip, which was where it always was, but tonight it felt less like equipment and more like what it was supposed to be, a promise she had made and intended to keep. She pulled onto the gravel shoulder at mile marker 31 without quite deciding to in advance, the way you sometimes turn toward a place before you have consciously formed the intention of going there. And she sat with the engine off and the windows down and listened to the pines and the distant sound of traffic and the particular quality of silence that a highway has when no one is on it. She thought about what Boone had said to her in his driveway. There's always another one. Like me, always has been, always will be. She did not dismiss it because it was true, and she had never been interested in comfort that required ignoring true things. There would be other Pruitts and other Boones in other counties on other roads, and she knew that. And she carried that knowledge the way you carry something heavy that you have chosen to carry because setting it down is not an option you find acceptable. But she also thought about the women, about the 11 who had sat in the front row for 3 weeks, about the ones in the deleted footage who had been located and called, some of whom had spoken to a federal agent for the first time in their lives and had not been believed to speak to before. About the ones who might have been out there that she hadn't found yet, driving through counties that still had their own Pruitt, their own highway, their own version of a Wednesday night that changed something permanently. Her phone buzzed on the passenger seat. An unknown number, a Georgia area code. She answered. "Is this Agent Reeves?" The voice was a woman's, careful and slightly formal in the way of someone who has rehearsed the first sentence. "It is," Naomi said. "This is Deja Monroe. I was one of the, I testified. I was number 4 in the trial. I just wanted to, I wanted to tell you something. I hope that's okay." "It's okay," Naomi said, and kept her voice easy, because the woman's voice had a fragility to it that deserved care. "I drove through last night," Deja said, "through Calverton, through Highway 22. First time in 2 years that I went that way." A pause. "I didn't pull over for anything." Naomi did not say anything for a moment. She looked out at the tree line, at the place where the pines met the sky, at the stretch of road that was just a road, now that had no weight to it beyond asphalt and lane markers and the normal mild mathematics of travel. "Good," she said finally. "You keep driving." She sat for a while after the call ended, not thinking about anything in particular or thinking about everything at once, in the undifferentiated way that happens when a thing has finally come to its conclusion and the mind doesn't quite know what to do with the space. She thought about Deja Monroe driving through Calverton in the dark without fear. She thought about what it takes to do that. Not the absence of history, because the history was still there, but the presence of something stronger than the fear of repeating it. She thought that courage is almost never the absence of fear. It is the decision to move anyway, which is a decision Naomi had made herself more times than she could count, and which she recognized and respected wherever she found it. She started the engine. She pulled back onto Highway 22, heading south, and the jazz came back on, and the road opened up ahead of her, and the stars were out over Calverton County, for the first time in what felt like a long season, visible above the pines, clear and bright and entirely indifferent to everything that had happened beneath them. A black woman drove through the dark without anything to fear, and that, as much as the badge or the trial or the sentence, was what the work was for. There are people who will tell you that justice is slow, and they are right, and there are people who will tell you that it is imperfect, and they are right about that too. But the story of Naomi Reeves and Highway 22 is a reminder that the imperfect, slow-moving thing is still worth fighting for, because the alternative is a world where Deja Monroe never makes that drive again, and that is not a world that any of us should be willing to accept. Pruitt thought the darkness and the empty highway and the badge on his chest made him untouchable. He found out that what he thought was armor was actually evidence that what he thought was power was actually a clock running down, and that the woman he pointed a gun at was the person keeping time. If this story sat with you the way it sat with us, we would be grateful if you'd take a moment to hit the like button. It helps this kind of story find the people who need to hear it. And if you want more stories like this, one stories about ordinary courage and extraordinary consequences and the long, hard road towards something that actually looks like justice, subscribe to our channel and ring the bell so you don't miss what comes next. We'd love to know what you think in the comments. Was 24 years the right sentence, or did you feel something different when the gavel came down? Tell us. We read every one. Thank you for being here. Drive safe out there.